Well, what is the hidden secret of Spain? I'm afraid that you are going to wait, because I have been 15 minutes to explain the experience of Spain as a food tourist destination, and I think that you can wait just 15 minutes. I suppose that some of you, if you have been in Spain, you know the answer. But anyway, for the rest, we just have to wait 10, 15 minutes to know the answer. Okay. Before to introduce you some figures about the food tourism in Spain, about the gastronomy, first of all, I would like to congratulate you, because first one, because to focus the topic of the summit in the terms of gastroeconomy, and I would like to introduce you some figures. I think that Kaya explained really well what is now the situation of Spain in terms of worldwide food tourism. But I would like to share with you what are 6 dimensions of the role of gastronomy in Spain. Because like some of the speakers before me told, first of all, we have to recognize the different roles that the gastronomy has in our societies. And the first one is that when we are talking about gastronomy, we are talking about culture. Then we have to protect and to enhance our culture. But gastronomy is also a fantastic tool for innovation and for regional development based on intangible capital. Is a tool also to enhance the primary sector and promote exports, obviously to dynamize and diversify tourism, and to promote sustainable development and obviously the country brand, the concept of gastro diplomacy that Kaya explained really, really well. Well, gastronomy is not longer just about food and cooking. It has become the latest fashion and a widespread subject of conversation. It reaches all kinds of publics, regardless of age, gender, cultural background, and country of origin. It's an intercultural and intergenerational movement that has become a global phenomenon thanks to massive media coverage. At the same time, we have to recognize that the tourist sector is a major contributor to the world's economy. Last year, there were 1,322 million international tourist arrivals. This is an important amount of people. Obviously, if you think that at the beginning of the statistics about tourism in the 60s of the last century, the statistics, the figures of international arrivals were 25 million. Then the increase in these years has been obviously amazing, but at the same time it's scaring. Then we have to take care how to manage the destinations to this important increase of tourism in the last years. Spain, you know, is an international leader not only in the tourist level, but also on the gastronomic level. Last year, Spain received an important amount of international tourists, 88.2 million tourists, and this generated more than 87 billion euros in revenue. Spain is the second most popular tourist destination by international arrivals after France, and the second by receipts just behind the United States. And Spain was declared the most competitive destinations the last year by the World Economic Forum. It has to be taken into account that tourism in Spain accounts the 11.2% of Spanish GDP and employs 12% of country's working population. And the tourists that visited Spain rated their holidays 8.5 out of 10. And that's the reason, obviously, that why tourists return to Spain, with many of them visiting the same destination each year. And gastronomy is gaining ground as one of the main reasons for traveling to Spain. In the last year, 15 million stated that gastronomy and Spanish wines were the main reasons for the choice of destinations. Can you imagine? 15 million people came for our food culture and for our wines. I suppose that there are many countries in the world that they don't have 50 million international visitors. We have to highlight that food tourists spend 30% more than sand and beach tourists. That's the reason why it's so important for destinations. And that's the reason why it's so important for Turkey. And this is the reason why some really well-known destinations in Spain, like the Canary Islands, are trying to enhance local gastronomy as a strategy to differentiate the destination to loyalty tourists and to increase the profitability of tourism. If tourist factors are considered, it can be seen that the travel sector has always been closely bound to the gastronomy. The food and gastronomy sector is one of the main world economic sectors. In Spain alone, the food and agriculture industry contributes 2.6% of GDP and employs 800,000 people in Spain. In addition, food and gastronomy has the best coverage rate and is the most dynamic sector of Spain's exports, more than 43 billion euros of exports. And Spain is the second top wine exporter in the world. It's the third in terms of volume, but it's the second in terms of top wine exportations. And Spain is a country with 68,000 restaurants and more than 200,000 bars. You can understand the Spanish people likes to live outside the house. And food and wine are the second highest rated experiences in Spain, which visitors rating their satisfaction 8.3 out of 10. Then, gastronomy plays a major role in the way tourists experience a destination, and many travelers visit and return to Spain to enjoy its unique gastronomy. Spain has become a name in the world of gastronomy thanks to new Spanish cuisine, obviously, and world-renowned Spanish chefs. But the international recognition of Spain gastronomy referring as aspects such as the cultural heritage. In order to look how gastronomy has helped to build Spanish image as a country and position, Spain's tourist brand, it's important to look at Spain's history. In fact, the history line of the Spanish gastronomy is the result and the evolution of many different and small stories. It's when you want to know the story of a tree, you have to cut it. And then you can see the sediments, the cultural and the heritage sediments of the past of the time, the evolution, the time, what happened with this tree. This is what we have to do with gastronomy, to understand as an evolution of our heritage. And what are the main different stories of the Spanish history in gastronomy? In the first step, Romans that set up the princess of the Mediterranean food trilogy in Spain, the olive oil, the wine and the wheat. Al-Andalus provide to Spain agricultural knowledge, culinary arts and sophistication, and obviously Sephardians, they gave us the base of the traditional Spanish food. In the Middle East, we can say that Spain can be considered the place where food globalization starts. From the east, we have the Silk Route, the spicy route, and the arrival of Colón to America was a huge contribution from a gastronomic perspective, as it increased the variety of products in the food market. Can you imagine now, probably the main product in Spain is the Spanish omelette, without the products that came from our friends from Peru, without the potato? Or can you imagine the Italian cuisine with the contribution of the tomatoes from Peru? It's impossible to understand now a pizza without this. In fact, it's impossible to understand with a pizza with the influence of the Silk Route and the influence of America. We have to recognize as well the influence of France from the 18th century, from the French Revolution. And I would like to point out there were two different revolutions. The tourist and culinary revolution. You have to know that in even the terms of tourism and gastronomy were established at the end of the 18th century. Tourist comes from a French word, tourist, and gastronomy was an invention of a French writer, Grimaud de la Reynière. He was one of the main writers in food tourism at the end of the century. I would like to point out that always the evolution of gastronomy is connected with other evolution of the culture and the society. In the case of the end of the 18th century, it was connected with the French Revolution. But in the 60s of the last year, it was connected with the May of '68 and the Nouvelle Vague. Then the evolution of our gastronomy culture is always connected to the evolution of the rest of the culture of our society. And in this history line of Spain, of the gastronomy of Spain, one of the main moments is the 70s, when a group of, at that moment, young chefs in the Basque Country started to move the traditional gastronomy to the innovation and to the creativity. Then it was a door that they opened, and some years later, a guy that I think now is very well known, that is Verne, set up the new Spanish cuisine, what we call now the cuisine of freedom. And in the modern area, 4 different landmarks on which gastronomy in Spain is nowadays based can be found. First of all is the Mediterranean diet, that it was declared World Heritage by UNESCO in 2010. Obviously, the regional diversity. In our opinion, the variety and diversity of the cuisine in Spain is a strength and is a richness. In fact, we have to say that we have to talk about Spanish cuisines more than a Spanish cuisine. The combination of tradition and innovation of Spanish chefs and the tapas culture. I would like to point out in this topic that when we are talking about tapas culture, we are not talking about only sharing a small portion of food. We are talking about a way of life, a way of socialize, and it's connected with other cultures. For example, in the case of Turkey, about the meze. I think it's more than sharing a small portion of culture. Then, just to finish, I would like to highlight 10 key factors of the experience of Spain that could be a recommendation for a tourist destinations. The first one is the importance of gastronomy in the country brand and tourist policy. I would like to point out the example of the plan for international promotion of enogastronomic tourism was developed thanks to a close collaboration between 2 ministries, tourism and environment and rural affairs, and the total value of the plan was 9 million euros. The collaboration of the ministries are not free, obviously. The flavors map of Spain, the heritage, the cultural and environment resources, the landscapes and the culinary tradition of the regions of Spain. Obviously, the popularity of Spanish cuisine and the complicity and commitment of our chefs. The recognition of gastronomy as an essential part of cultural heritage. That's the reason why the Spanish Parliament approved a law that considers gastronomy, culinary arts and food part of the intangible cultural heritage of Spain. The protection and recognition of local productions, like with brands like appellation of origin, regional marks, regional brands. In this case, this is very important to understand food tourism as a value chain. And then we have to include all the players that are important and the different steps of this value chain to understand and to develop this project in our country. Obviously, the importance of knowledge, innovation, education, and creativity. I'm not going too deep in this topic because my colleague and friend, Jose Mari, later is going to explain Basque Culinary Center, but that, in my opinion, is one of the best practices in the world to understand what is the role of gastronomy in this topic. Then, the important role of gastronomy in the product portfolio of Spain. We have to remark the creative cuisine, the traditional restaurants, the hotels that are working hard to improve the offering and the offering of gastronomy, the tapas culture, the development of wine and food routes, the markets that become one of the best places to understand what is the Spanish culture of gastronomy, the organizing of culinary activities, and obviously events and festivals like San Sebastián Gastronómica that you know really well. The articulation of a credible, authentic narrative of the Spanish gastronomy with the support of the chefs, and one topic that is quite important, the organizing of the governance. In this case, the primary sector and tourists are deeply interviewed, so private and public cooperation and coordination are necessary. Some examples from Spain. Tasting Spain as an organization where collaborating public and private associations, the Royal Spanish Academy of Gastronomy, or the Spanish Institute for Foreign Trade. And just to finish, because I know that I'm out of time, sorry about that. What is the real secret of Spain? in my opinion, is that we love our food and our wines. In fact, the Spanish are the main market for food tourism. 3 or 4 Spanish people have made at least one trip in the last 2 years motivated by gastronomy. And we are talking about an important amount of trips, 462 million last year. That's the reason why we are really important to the development and promotion of food tourism. And just to finish, I want to share with you one statement of probably one of my favorite writers in Spain, and he wrote a lot about gastronomy. It was Manuel Vázquez Montalbán. The people that don't drink this wine and don't eat this cheese, they have a big identity problem. Thank you very much.